So you are a leader, you have built it. The team, the results, the reputation, you made the hard calls when nobody else would. You stayed late when everyone else went home. You held the standard when it would have been easier to let it go. And now you cannot leave for a week without everything slowing down. Decisions pile up until you are back. Your team waits for your input on things they should already own. You are in every meeting, on every thread, approving every move, and you are just exhausted. Here's what nobody will tell you to your face. You are the bottleneck. The thing you built is now trapped inside the person who built it. And the harder you work, the worse it gets. Because every hour you spend doing the work is an hour your team spends learning that they don't need to. This is the most common leadership trap in business and the most dangerous part. It doesn't feel like a problem, it feels like being needed. My guest today has spent 30 years coaching thousands of business owners and executives across 80 countries, and he sees this pattern everywhere. Brad Sugarts is the founder of ActionCoach, the world's largest business coaching firm. Oh my God. Author of 18 books and someone who had to confront this trap in himself before he could help anyone else escape it. He built a global organization operating in 1,000 and plus offices precisely because he learned how to stop being the center of it. Today, we are going somewhere uncomfortable. We are talking about ego disguised as quality standards. I know that. About unconsciously sabotage delegation because being indispensable feels like being important. Oh, somebody say, I am the boss yesterday, but I will not say the name of that person. You made about why I cannot find anyone good enough is almost never the real problem. And about what it actually takes to build a team that doesn't just function without you, but thrives. If you ever felt like you cannot step back without things falling apart, this conversation will show you why that's a design problem, not a people problem. Brad, welcome to the Growth Hacking Culture Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here.
I'm so excited to have this conversation. I think that there's so many things we can get through.
I'm excited because this problem that I have mentioned, it is something that is very particular to me. I don't know how to let it go, and I want to learn how the hell I get rid of it. Brad, you have coached thousands of business owners, and you keep seeing the same pattern. A leader who builds something impressive becomes the very thing stopping it from growing it further. Why is this so universal, and why cannot most leaders see it in themselves?
Well, what you've got to remember is that what gets you successful in the beginning is that the working hard, the being in control, the doing the job. And that's what brings success in the beginning. The challenge is what got you success in the beginning is what stops you being able to grow, what stops you being able to scale past that point. So, when I'm talking with business owners, executives, and they see themselves, they've got to turn from building the business or building the job or doing the work into building other people who do the job or building other people who do the work. And so I see it as a progression from being a great technician to a great manager to a great leader to a great coach. And so moving through that progression in your career is always going to be challenging because it takes growth, it takes change, it takes you becoming a different version of yourself. And the hardest work in business is not the doing of the job. The hardest work in business is the growing of the business person. So whether you're an executive, an owner, and brand new employee, you have to realize that it's you growing. I was with a business owner yesterday and he was talking about building his business. I said, yeah, but what you've got to remember is that while you're building the business is also building you. And I think that's a really important understanding. Whatever job you have, you might be building, but it's building you at the same time and helping you become a better version of yourself at the same time.
Brad, but it looks too easy the way you say it. But let's be honest, when it's about us, it's very tough because we are always thinking we cannot find someone good enough to delegate to.
no one's as good as me theory, Ivan. Of course, no one's as good as Ivan at running a podcast. No one could do it as good as any of us, really.
So, but how do we get rid of it? Really, it's very difficult.
Let's remember this. It's actually pretty simple, but simple doesn't mean easy. Simple, and this is where I as a teacher or as a coach always go back to Einstein's thinking, where he said, if you can't teach it simply, then you don't know it well enough to be teaching it. So my theory on this is that our job as a person is to become the best version of ourselves. Your job as a leader, your job as a manager is to become the best version of yourself. So as a technician, and you do the job of the business, and then you get promoted to manager, and let's be blunt, management training doesn't exist anymore. It's gone. And the theory, somewhere in the late 90s, management became a dirty, you don't want to be a manager, you want to be a leader. And it's like, no, you actually need management, because without management there's no execution. And what is management? I'll give you my definition. Management is creating competent, productive people. It's just two things. I don't like lists of 400 things. I read some leadership books and here's the 742 strategies of leadership. It's like, no, two things. Just give me two. I'm a very simple human. So management is about how competent and how productive are you people. So Ivan, think of it this way. Let's imagine we had a normal manager and we said to them, all right, list your direct reports. And they listed their direct reports. And we said, all right, rank them on a scale of 1 to 10 on competency. How competent are your direct reports? And let's say that a person ranked their direct reports, and I actually did this with a group 2 weeks ago, and one gentleman was very proud. He said, Brad, my people, I need them to get more competent. They're only, on average, they're a 4 out of 10 competency. And I said, what's their productivity? He said, their average productivity is 3 out of 10. They're not doing a very good job. And I said, here's the thing. That's not actually their score. That's your score. Because as a manager, you're 4 out of 10 as a manager on competency and 3 out of 10 as a manager on productivity. Because a manager's job is to build people. If you build them, they build it. But if you don't build them, if you don't make them better, if you don't train them, mentor them, coach them, educate them, send them to training programs, how do you expect them to perform at a high level that you've never trained them at? You never see a sports person, like I'm watching the World Cup right now. I'm sure they all train about 10 times more than they play. You know what I mean? So we've got to understand that the job of a manager is building competent, productive people. And unfortunately, again, 3 weeks ago, I was with a business owner and he was telling me how bad his managers are. And I said, oh, really? How many hours of training have your managers had? And he looked at me and he said, we send them to all the leadership programs. I said, no, no, I get it. You've trained them in leadership, but how many hours of training in management? And he said, none. I said, so maybe the problem is that you haven't installed a management system. You have no systemic management. Therefore, there's no clarity into the organization. Therefore, there's no consistency of performance. And so it's when we train people to be great managers. I'll tell you, Ivan, when I had to learn this, I was 21, I think. And I went to my dad and I said, you know what, Dad, I just can't get good people because I owned my own business. And he looked me dead in the eye. And Dad's a very blunt man, as most of his generation are. And he said, Brad, you get the people you deserve. I'm like, what? He said, well, you're an average manager running an average company. No one above average wants to work for you. I'm like, gee, Dad. So you can see, Ivan, where I got my motivational streak from. You can tell that that's exactly where that happened. So, yes. So, yes, technician has to become a manager.
I get it, but I want to understand. So you have defined clearly what is managing, which is the creation of systems in order to improve productivity and efficiency, in fact, of people. But then, so in your definition, what is leadership then?
So leadership then is also two things. Again, I'm a very simple man. Leadership is passion and focus. So if I was going to grade you on management, I would look at productivity and I would look at the ability to do the job and the ability to do it at speed. Okay. So That's management, right? With leadership, I look at their passion and their focus. So if I'm to rate a leader, I will look at the team and I'll say, okay, rate them on passion, rate them on focus, and we'll see. Because so management is a system, leadership is an art form, but there's three factors in leadership that have to be present in order for leadership to work. Number one is the framework. If a company doesn't have a vision, mission, culture statement, or agreed core values, if it doesn't have a manifesto, or if it doesn't have these things, I call them the framework. Because unless you have an agreed set of core values, how do you lead? Unless you have an agreed vision, how do you lead? Unless you have an agreed common goal of the organization, you can't lead. So unless those things are present, it's impossible for leadership to be present. Second thing is you've then got to learn the skills of leadership. Communication is a skill of leadership. And I meet leaders who they're in a leadership position. And I said, well, when was the last time you went to a communication training? And they look at me like I'm stupid or something, because it's like, hang on, have you done decision-making training? No, I've never done decision-making training. Okay. Have you ever done planning training? Have you ever done delegation training? You know, the triangle of delegation being systems, training, and measures. If you don't have systems, training, and measures, if you haven't learned these skills, Ivan, you can't be a great leader. But then third, and this is unfortunately the part of leadership that pretty much every book talks about, but they forget that you need a framework and you need the skills of a leader. The third part is, what style of leader do you want to be? Now, I'll use me as an example. There are some leaders who are amazing leaders who lead with compassion and heart, and they are huggers and they make the world feel better about themselves. Now, if I tried that leadership style, Ivan, you could imagine just how bad it would go, right? It's definitely, my kids would look at me as if, who is that dad? I don't know that person, you know? So, and you've got to decide what leadership style is yours, because the way leadership works, there is job, career, calling. Okay. So we as human beings, we can get a job, we can turn that job into a career, and then we can turn that career into a calling. Now, most humans, let's be blunt, never get past job. Most humans never get past job. If someone's on your podcast right now, guaranteed they're at least at career. No one at job is listening to podcasts about how to be better. You know, at career, you're on podcasts. Now, at calling, and this is where a great leader understands, and I think it was probably best said by Ted Lasso on the super famous TV show, that my job is to make better humans both on and off the pitch. My job as a leader is not to make you just better in the work. My job is to help you be a better human being. My job is to help you be a better person. And I, as a leader, expect 20 years from now, people who worked with me, for me, in my organization to come back and say, you know what? Working for you changed my life. That's what a real leader does. But the two main ways I score a leader is passion and focus. Are your people passionate, and are your people focused? You know, so managers have to deal with that daily, weekly, monthly, even up to quarterly. So time frame is up to quarterly as managers. Leaders deal with monthly, quarterly, annual, long-term sort of thing. So there's a different time frame of management and leadership as well. So when we install management systems in companies, it's really interesting because, you know, most people don't have a management system. They just have a manager. And you know, it's that sort of thing. People don't have leadership systems. They just have a leader. And so when we want consistency of performance, we need systemic of those things. And there are soft systems and hard systems in a business. The hard systems is, you know, if I use, say, McDonald's, the hard system is, how do you turn that burger over? The soft system is, how do you recruit someone? What vision do you talk about? Those, you know, all of those soft systems in a company that are very important. And then finally, Ivan, we move to the coach level, where you're no longer needed to be daily or weekly interaction with people. Your job is to ask them questions and let them do all the thinking and come up with the answers. So, you know, I think Alan Mulally was he wasn't possibly, he was CEO of the Year twice here in America, once for Boeing Aircraft Company when he turned around Boeing, and once for Ford Motor Car Company when he turned around Ford. So that's a CEO if there's ever a CEO. And he said, there was a great book written about him called American Icon. And he said, my job as the leader is to say nothing. Because the ultimate leader has built the people to a point where they are capable of making all the decisions. And all you need to do is ask them questions to make them think in the right direction. And that's really important. Thinking in the right direction is what your questions should do. So I'll use my kids as an example. If I come in and I say, why is the dinner table not set? I've asked a negative question. In other words, I've asked a question that goes in reverse and goes backwards. If I ask the question of whose turn was it to set the dinner table, still a negative question. See, the first question is going to get blame. The first question is going to get excuses. The second question is going to get blame. Why leads to excuses. It just does. A manager or leader has to ask better questions. So then the who question will lead to blame. So it's the finger pointing that goes on in all.
Yep.
The questions you ask you have to be very good at asking great questions. And so there's three components to a great question. Number one component to a great question is that it is forward moving, not why isn't this out to the customer? What do we need to do to get this to the customer? Forward moving. Second is it has a detail orientation, not what do we need to do to get this to the customer? What's the first two steps in getting this to the customer? Third part, what are the first two steps that we need to do to get this to the customer in the next 10 minutes? So time frame. If you learn good questions, now I'm not saying don't deal with the issue, but don't deal with the issue during the game. You don't see here in the World Cup the manager of the team or the coach running out on the pitch halfway during the game going, Ivan, why did you kick the ball in the wrong direction? You know, you see it afterwards when they watch the film. So get out of the emotional time and get into the asking question time later in your weekly meeting with each team, which brings me to a point. Part of management is a weekly one-on-one meeting with each team member, because the dumbest thing in management was a policy that was invented somewhere in the 80s called my door is always open. That is the dumbest part of management that I think I've ever seen. If you as a leader and manager have someone come to you with questions all day, every day, you've become the bottleneck. If they have to keep coming to you, it's because you have not built them into competent, productive humans who are passionate and focused, who can make their own decisions. So, Ivan, if you came to me to ask a question, I wouldn't answer your question. I would do one of two things. I would say, great, bring it to the meeting. Now, for the first 2 weeks, that's tough because you've trained them to ask you questions. So we have 2 meetings every week with our team. One is a group meeting on Monday morning where we all go through what we call our weekly lion. Now, a lion stands for last week, issues, opportunities, and next week. So when you use that weekly meeting, and we've got to define the purpose of meetings. The purpose of meetings is communication. Remember that. Always remember the purpose is communication so that things don't slip through the cracks. Now, for it to be a great meeting, you have to, as a leader, and I have a little tool called Plord, and Plord records my meetings. Guess what Plord also does? It tells me what percentage of the time I was speaking. Now, if I go over 20%, it's a bad meeting. I want to be somewhere between 10 and 15% of the speaking time. If I'm in a room of 8 people or 5 people, I should not be more than 20% of the communication. So that's why I say when a meeting is about communication. So on a Monday morning, we have a group meeting where everyone goes through what's happening for the week and we make the group decisions. So why do I as a leader make decisions in front of the group? So the group understands why we're making that decision. So the group understands how the decision was made. So the group actually is part of the decision-making process. And therefore, whether they made the decision or not, they buy in. Now, the second meeting we have is the Lion meeting, which is one-on-one on a Thursday. And this is where saying to someone, great, bring it to the meeting is really important. Now, whether they send me an email, great idea, bring it to the meeting. Send me a text. Great idea. Bring it to the meeting. Now, about 2 weeks of doing that, guess what most of my team members learn? To just
Stop.
bring it to the meeting. Because here's the problem. If they keep coming to you and asking questions and you keep answering them, you're the bottleneck in the company. All decisions slow down. You've not built competent, productive people. You've built minions. And that is a problem in the business. So the other way I handle it when they come with questions, if there is an urgency to it. So let's say they come to me with something where we do actually need to decide on it right. I will use a series of questions, not a question, but a series of questions to help them make the decision. Now, I want to preface this for a second. I could probably use one question because I can make the mental leap to the answer instantly. I've not taught them to make that decision yet. So I need to use a series of questions in most cases. So if you said to me, Brad, should we go A or B? I would say, well, Ivan, let's look at that. What's the best advantages of A? And what are the advantages of B? What's the disadvantages of A? What's the disadvantage of B? How might A impact our future? How might B impact our future? Based on our goal, then, Ivan, which of those would be the best decision, do you think? So a series of questions that lets you think, decide. So by the end of that session, you've now learned a better way of making decisions. You've now learned the process of thinking through all of that. So that's part of the coaching process where we stop talking and we start asking.
Brad, I love the simplicity of how you explain this kind of complex topic when you look at this, when you are in front of the challenge itself. But I like the fact that you are providing a better name for managing, because we have to be sincere. In the as of the early 2000s, it got a bad reputation because there was the rise of these empathetic, human-centric leadership thoughts. But it didn't have to die. It had to perfect or align better with this human-centric leadership model. And I love that you finally join it with the culture, which is the expected environment where everything becomes a little bit more smooth. And when we look at the sustainability of behaviors that we are establishing as a manager and then as a leader. Without culture, of course, this sustainability dies in 3 seconds and a half. Now, I have a question for you, because there is like a kind of a dark side to this that nobody talks about. It's about some leaders need to be needed.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, like, even in relationships, when I was younger, I needed to be needed by that girlfriend. Today, I'm old, I'm living with the same wife for so many years. I don't need it. I don't need to be needed at all. But back in the days, but is that something that you see very often in your work? And how do you help people confront it? This, I need someone.
Look, I tell you my own story, Ivan. I built my business so that it can run without me. That's what I always do, because a business that needs the owner is not a business. It's just a bigger job for the owner. You know, that's the reality. If you have your own business and you need to be there every day, you don't have a business, you have a job and you work for a lunatic.
Yeah.
What I see is, I'll use my example. So at 26, I built my business to run without me. I tried to retire. And let's just say I was very bad at retirement, to the point where I would sabotage the business so it needed me again, because I wasn't emotionally mature enough to allow the business to operate without me. Logically, I could see that that's what was needed, that the business should be able to run without the owner being present and so on. But emotionally, I needed to be needed, similar as what you said with girlfriends way back when type thing, right? So when we look at success as a leader is freeing yourself up to be able to move on to do the next thing. From a time, like I look at mine, every year I meet with my assistant at the end of the year. Her name is Sarah. And we sit down and we go through my calendar and we rule out 80% of the things that I did this year and say, those things are not allowed on my calendar next year. Because next year is going to be different and I need to be doing different things. I need to be doing more. AI is having a big impact in the world, so I need to spend time learning that. I need to spend time mastering these things. I need to get better at these aspects of the world. So I need to stop focusing on the things that I used to do and focus on the future. Now, if you're in a growth mode, 100%, you will be okay with not being needed. If, however, your business isn't in a growth mode or your job isn't in a growth mode, you will consistently be thinking about being needed. It reminds me of, the employee of the government who says, everyone slow down. We need to have more, like we're doing the work too fast. We need to slow down so that there is more work so that we've got more budget. It's that way of thinking is the idea. Now, I hate to say it this way, Ivan, but we do. We live in an epidemic of wimpy goals. We live in a world that has the average business saying, let's grow by last year plus 10%. Let's do just a bit better than we did before. Let's do just that little bit more. We live in that world where we're not stretching ourselves. And unfortunately, the definition of a goal has somehow become a to-do list item. If you already know how to do it, it's not a goal. If you already are capable of doing it, it's not a goal. If you don't have to learn, grow, develop, create, invent, disrupt, if you don't have to change, it's not a goal. And so we live in a world where we set goals based on, I already know how to do that, so I'll set that as my goal. And they even call it it's a stretch goal. If you don't have to learn and grow, it's not a goal, because we also live in a world, Ivan, where the enemy of goals is the word how. So this how factor, and let's say someone sets a goal and they go, well, how are you going to do that? 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 And I've even read books where they say you have to ask how 5 times before you look. When you set a goal, this is the formula for success. I'll teach it to you. It's 5 stages to success: dream, goal, learn, plan, action. You got to have the dream. So when you talk about owners who need to be needed or leaders who need to be needed, it's because they don't have anything bigger to do. If you have a bigger goal, if you have something bigger, you're growing into that role. You're growing into that dream. You're growing into that vision. And therefore, you don't want to be needed in those small things anymore because you've got bigger things to go and do. So dreams have to be turned into goals. Dreams is more than 5 years out sort of thing. And a lot of people struggle with dreams and they're like, well, I don't know how it's going to happen or if it's going to happen. Perfect. That's the definition of a dream. If you knew how it was going to happen, it wouldn't be named a dream, vision, dream, whatever terminology you want to use. Well, your dreams turned into goals. Once you've turned it into a goal, the purpose of a goal is to tell you what you need to learn. So if I said to you, your new goal is to double the business that you're doing, or your new goal is to increase productivity by 50%. And you went, I don't know how to increase productivity by 50%. Excellent. Dream, goal, learn. So go do the study. See, scientists understand this. They put out a hypothesis, a goal, and then they go and do the experiments and the research and the study to prove the goal or make the goal a reality. Business people, for some reason, seem to think that, well, I set a goal, I'm just going to go to work and do it. No, you need to give yourself the grace of the learning time. Give yourself the time to do the study, the learning, the growing, the getting better, so that you can achieve that. Because if you could have achieved that goal right now, you would have. But you can't achieve it because you don't know how. That, by definition, is a goal. If you knew how, it's not a goal. It's called a to-do list item. So dream, goal, learn, then the planning. Now, if you skip the learning, guess what the planning says? Do the same things you did before, because you don't know any different. And you know what most plans say, Ivan? Just do more of what we did before. And it's like, yeah, that's not going to work. See, If we set big goals, we essentially disrupt ourselves. If we set big goals, we disrupt our own organization. You think back to COVID. COVID disrupted organizations. It changed organizations. We had to become virtual. We had to become global. We had to. When you set big goals, you disrupt yourself. You change yourself. You change things. I'll use myself as an example. We set a massive goal for ActionCoach. And it was because during COVID, I don't know about you, but I had more time to think during COVID than I think I've had in a long time, which was both good and bad, obviously. I thought, you know what, Brad, because at the time we're doing hundreds of millions, we're very good. And I describe it as a mental fat and happy. I didn't have to challenge myself. I didn't have to go and do new things, but I set a new goal of challenging myself to billions instead of hundreds of millions. And my team looked at me very weird. They're like, oh my God, they've legalized weed in Vegas. The old man's smoking it. He's gone crazy. There's no way we can hit that goal, boss. We have no idea how to hit that goal. And I said, exactly. Guess what we're going to have to do for the next 6 or 12 months? We're going to have to do research. We're going to have to do study. We're going to have to invent and create and come up with new ways of doing things. And I'd set a goal of 3 billion. I do honestly think after doing all the research that I've set too low of a goal. But when you've got 1,000 offices around the world, getting them to believe in the first goal is hard enough. Getting them to then sitting back and going, yeah, you know what I should do? I should change that goal. Now that I've got you all believing in it, I should change the goalpost. No, that's the dumbest leadership strategy there is. You know, if you look at leaders, one of the big killers of leadership is trust. And if you keep changing things, trust goes out the window. You know, people find it hard to follow a leader they don't trust. And so I had to learn that. So back to your question, there's only one reason you will want to be needed, and that is you don't have anywhere bigger and better to go. If you had somewhere bigger and better to go, you wouldn't be needed doing the small things. So set bigger goals and you won't need that. You won't have that.
That is beautiful. I want to dwell a little bit more into this part of learning, because I think that there is the misconception that in the part when you were talking about the 5 steps, learning is not about going and taking an online class. Sometimes learning is going into the area of experimentation, doing things that you usually don't do, just to have new hypotheses so that you can reach your dream. Because the dream cannot be, as you said, made out of the stuff that I did before, but with more intensity. No, it doesn't work like this. Dream, you need to have an hypothesis, an experimentation moment that is with low risk so that you can start looking at different things. And you mentioned something even before about the use of AI. You were using, you mentioned that you are using something that is going to listen to your conversations and tell you if you're talking too much. Now, this story about AI is giving us a little bit an opportunity to be more accountable about what we want to reach about ourselves. I'm speaking too much. And of course, we cannot measure it. We are not aware when we talk, unless we have somebody who's made us accountable. 18%, 25% today. Have you seen already in this discovery moment that you are in terms of AI, and you see the need of it also for your business? Have you seen something that helps you out with this story about the problems with delegation, where we become like the idiots that prevent others to grow and us to be the slave? Have you seen something in this area?
Yeah. So I want to, everything you just said reminded me of a thought that current success means you know what used to work. So if you're successful today, it means you know what worked before. It doesn't mean you know what's going to work going forward. So the learning aspect, and you mentioned that, you know, learning sometimes is about doing. Well, the vast majority of learning isn't a new skill, it's a new person. It's the identity shift. It's the behavioral shifts. Our training programs, for example, run for 12 weeks. We won't do a one-day training in a company. All of our trainings run for 12 weeks, and we do a very small learning, about a half hour of learning, and then an hour of discussion around that, because we sit down and say, we want implementation, because only through implementation do we get actual growth.
Yes.
Now, coming back to the AI part of that question, my presupposition around AI is that Well, let me go back, because I think to go forward, we have to go back sometimes. And luckily, being 55, I have 30 plus years of business experience to dwell on when thinking about what is the next phase. And luckily, I've been through 7 different technology shifts where everyone said, oh, the world is ending. The internet is going to stop everything, and the Y2K and all of these things. And I think we've got a lot of that with AI right now, in that, we see that 60 and 70% of companies are using AI. Ivan, we're still at less than 3% of the population is on a paid AI subscription. Let's be clear, okay? You're not using AI unless you have a paid version of AI that you're using, right? So let's understand that. Second, if you haven't digitized everything, AI can't help you. If everything is in your head, AI cannot assist you properly. So we're in a phase called digitize or die. If you don't digitize everything in your company, and so for us, when we go into companies, we install our operating system in those companies. And so the operating system is a framework of how to build a business, and it's backed by a software. The software allows them to digitize everything that happens in their company. So we've got to get to that point before people are saying, oh, AI, and let's remember, AI has been around for 30 odd years, for goodness sake. Google was always artificial intelligence. The algorithm was full artificial intelligence to find things on Google. What's caught up, though, is called computing power. We now have the ability, or computers now have the ability, to process at a speed that brings us what we see as AI today. So that's very important. Now, for example, I have AI running right now here at my desk, my Claude. It runs all day. When I sit down at my desk or wherever I am, I can wear it on my thing. I have a pair of glasses as well, not this pair, but another pair. I can wear my mirror glasses, and it literally records everything that happens all day. And at the end of the day, it will remind me of the 4 or 5 things that I need to do, that I've commented on, that I've done that. It sends it to my assistant, and she makes certain that those things get put into my calendar and that. Because we don't rise to our goals, we fall to our schedule. If it's not on your schedule, it's not going to happen. And this is where most people, they don't schedule things well enough. They put a to-do list together, but they won't schedule it. I schedule everything. If I look at a task and I go, that's going to take 2 hours, it goes in the schedule. We don't rise to our goals, we fall to our schedule. So coming back to AI right now, 30 years ago when I started in business, Mike Bash, he was the founding president or vice president of Federal Express. He said to me, Brad, 80% of business is routine, so you need to systematize it. Great. He said, the other 20%, you've got to train your people, because 20% of business needs humans to make a decision. So train your people to make the decisions. Where we sit today, Ivan, is we're on the process of moving to 80% of business is going to be done by computers. We're about 50% right now is done by computers. Look at your accounting software. Look at your website. Look at your emails. About 50% of business is done by software, computers, etc. If we look at the manufacturing business today, they're more like 85, 95% is done by computers. Building a car today, it's not done by humans, it's done by robots, and the humans run the robots. Elon Musk now has robots running the robots. And he said they're about 80% effective as humans. This was like a month or so ago. So gradually we'll move to the point where 80% of business will be done by bots. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with the 20% of business that can only be done by humans. The human element, the relationships, the leadership. It leaves us with that 20% where the human experience comes in, giving a customer experience. A robot can help with customer experience, but it'll never make someone feel like a waiter does at a restaurant, and that way you feel about things. Yes, you in your restaurant can have a robot that drives to someone's table and delivers their sushi. Excellent. But that'll never replace the waiter walking over and saying, wow, you've picked the best dish on the menu. You guys are going to have a wonderful experience eating this. I can't wait to come back and find out how well you felt about this dish. So we've got to get to a point. Now, we also have to remember, Ivan, that we're only 100 years into the 40-hour work week. When Henry Ford and his business partner declared the 40-hour work week and the $5 per day pay rate was in 1926. So here in 2026, I'll make a prediction for you. We will move to the 20-hour work week within the next 10 years. Because humans are going to be 4 to 5 to 10 times more effective with AI. Give you an example. I was chatting with one of my friends. He built the entertainment network, and he's multi-billionaire. And I was chatting with him recently. He said, Brad, it used to take me 6 months to build a new show, to go and do market testing and get feedback and see. He says, now it takes me about 6 hours to build a new TV show. He said, I can do all the testing. I can do all the feedback. I can do all of these things through AI that I couldn't do before. Even for me, Ivan, I've written 18 books on business, right? And it would take me about a year to write a book. Now I'm writing a book a month. So I will talk to the AI for several hours. And after talking to it for several hours, it will come back and put all my thoughts into a format. I write an article a day, okay, for my blog. And that used to take me about an hour and a half to 2 hours to write that article. Now, AI interviews me. Literally, it'll ask me 10 to 12 questions. It will interview me for 10, 15 minutes, depending upon how long I ramble, which, as you've obviously found out right now, I do talk quite a lot. But AI, it'll interview me, and then it'll turn all of my thoughts into an article for me. So I can write my articles in 10, 15 minutes a day rather than an hour and a half a day. So I've increased my capabilities by 4 to 5 times. Now, we've moved from the information age, where the job was to get the information, into the intelligence age. That's what AI is. We've moved into the intelligence age. Before, it was about getting the information. Now, we have too much information. And so what AI can do for you, so for example, my CMOs in my companies, literally every week, they will have AI do a full analysis of all of our marketing. Now, if they were to try and do that as a human, it would take them all week to read the reports. Just to read the reports would take all week. Now they feed I think it's around 11 reports that we have, being the HubSpot report, your Instagram report, and all the reports from all the social media, all of the advertising, all of the websites gets put into a thing, and 10 minutes later, they have a full understanding of exactly what worked and exactly what didn't in the thing. So AI is allowing us to think faster. And that's where most people are missing the best benefit of it. Keep feeding it the data and let it do the analysis so you can make better decisions. You will make far better decisions today but again, if you haven't digitized everything, AI can't help very much because it can only process what is in the computer, what's in the thing. So
let me summarize a little bit what I have understood out of this discussion. So you will continue to be the bloody bottleneck of the growth of your team and the slave of your work if one. Second, building yourself as a leader. So you were talking about passion and focus. Third, aligning that thing with the environment, which means the culture of the company. What is the set of beliefs, actions that everybody does? Do we have everything that allow us to manifest our leadership without friction? And fourth is what you have mentioned now. If you're a leader and you are a little bit too afraid of AI and you don't start using AI, you are going to be the bottleneck, because today it is so easy. All farts like us, we talk with AI, we use something to speak. I use Flow Whisper or whatever it's called, so that it talks with my AI, so that every day there is a dump of a little bit of my brain, or let's call it like that, so that we have the possibility to reuse it, to learn out of how did we use our time, to prevent and to make it more efficient. So asking AI the question, how can I make it quicker, this thing, because it's taking me, as you say, today 15 minutes, we have one blog article, and before it was, for me, it wasn't 2 hours like you, it was 4 hours, by the way, for me. So 4 things that we need to do in order to avoid being that bottleneck. Am I correct with that? Tell me,
Look,
Brad.
we should get rid of the last 45 minutes and just do your summary. I think that's a fantastic way to summarize it.
I will only
Ultimately,
publish a summary then, Brad.
yes, ultimately, Ivan, we as business people have to understand that our job is to keep getting better. If we keep getting better, business is never going to get easier. You have to get better at business. So, yeah.
Brad, what is the best
What a
way
great
to reach you
conversation.
out? Yeah,
If
I
people
love
want
this
to
conversation. We could go on, but I know that tell me.
people just on Instagram. I mean, you can find all the websites and stuff, bradsugars.com or actioncoach.com. But if you jump on Instagram and message me the word playbook, just DM me playbook, we'll send you a link and you can pick from any of my 10 books that I have as ebooks and audiobooks. You can pick from any of the 10, whether it's sales or team building or building a company or wealth or change. All of the ebooks are there. So yeah, just jump on Instagram, message me playbook, and we'll send you the link.
That is lovely. So by the way, I'm going to put the link to your Amazon page so that we can see the 18 books, because we got the choice and you have taken all the human side and the business hardcore side all together. You have been covering everything. Brad, it was so nice, really, and really a beautiful learning experience for me to speak to you.
Wonderful. Ivan, I love having this conversation. And yes, I'm wonderfully excited by speaking with Spanish accents and all sorts of things. So
Lovely. Take care, my man.
thanks, buddy.